The galaxy had long since forgotten the Crimson Legion, the once unstoppable force that had dominated the stars. Their mighty fleets, forged in the fires of countless wars, had been scattered to the winds. Their soldiers, once the most feared in the universe, had become little more than a whispered legend. The galaxy had moved on, leaving behind the ashes of a civilization that had once ruled all. But deep within the dust of a forgotten world, a secret was about to be uncovered, a secret that would awaken the dead. Far beneath the surface of the barren planet Kalos, buried in the crumbling ruins of an ancient outpost, a pulse of energy flared to life. The long-dormant systems hummed back into existence, and in the darkened silence of a cryptic chamber, a series of chambers containing the bodies of the lost warriors stirred. These were the Revenant Sentinels, once the most elite soldiers of the Crimson Legion. They had died centuries ago, victims of a war that had destroyed their empire. Their bodies, preserved in stasis, had been thought lost to time. But now, a strange power had reactivated the ancient technology that held their remains. It was an artifact, a remnant of the Legion's final, most secretive weapons, a device designed not just to preserve life, but to bring it back. It was the last hope of a dying empire, and now it was working its impossible magic, stitching together flesh and metal, reawakening souls long lost. The first to stir was Kaldar, a towering figure clad in the blood-red armor of the Legion's elite. His eyes snapped open, glowing with an eerie light, as if his very essence had been reprogrammed to serve once more. The remnants of his memories slowly flooded back into his consciousness, flashes of battle, of comrades lost, and of the fall of the Crimson Legion itself. His mind was slow to adjust, the passage of time an alien concept to him now. He had no time to dwell on this. He was a soldier, and soldiers obey orders. Kaldar's hand moved instinctively, grasping his weapon, the razor-sharp glaive of the Crimson Legion, its edge honed to cut through anything in its path. His armor creaked as he rose from the chamber's cold floor, a mechanical whirring accompanying every movement. The other sentinels began to awaken around him. Each was a warrior of legend in their own right, and each was now bound to the same purpose. Something had brought them back, something greater than themselves. One by one, the sentinels rose. Drake, the swift and cunning scout whose mind had been sharpened by countless tactical simulations. Talara, the unyielding tank whose shield had once stood against entire armies. And finally, Renos, the commander who had led the Crimson Legion to its final disastrous campaign. They had all been awakened, though none of them fully understood why or by whom. They were not just soldiers anymore. They were revenants, cursed with eternity, and bound by an unknown force. The eerie hum of the machinery died down as the last of the sentinels stirred to life. The chamber was still. Only the soft rasp of their breath and the clinking of armor against the cold stone broke the silence. "What is this place?" Drake's voice echoed, raspy and hoarse, as he adjusted to the strange world around him. He had not spoken in centuries, and the words felt foreign in his mouth. Renos, the commander, stood silently, surveying the chamber. "It's Kalos, the ancient stronghold of the Crimson Legion." His voice was steady, though beneath the surface, uncertainty rippled. The last time he had been here, he had been on a mission to prevent the Legion's downfall. He had failed. But failure was something the Sentinels had learned to live with, until now. "We were brought back for a reason," Kaldar said, his voice low but commanding. "We are the Legion's last hope." The others nodded grimly, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. But what lay beyond the ruins of Kalos? Who had awakened them, and why? The galaxy had long since turned its back on the Crimson Legion. Whatever force had resurrected them had not been kind enough to leave answers behind. But there was one certainty. The Sentinels would not stand idle. They would fight, as they always had. They were reborn, and the galaxy would soon know their name again. The Revenant Sentinels stepped into the unknown, the desolate plains of Kalos stretching endlessly before them. The once proud world was now little more than a graveyard, its cities reduced to ruins and its landscapes barren, ravaged by wars long forgotten. The Sentinels, though resurrected, were still strangers to this new galaxy. Time had warped the universe around them, and the streets they had once walked as commanders and legends now stood empty. But there was no time for reflection. The galaxy, it seemed, had moved on, and not in ways that would favor the likes of them. As the Sentinels assembled in their battle gear, Kaldar took the lead, his gaze sharp and unyielding. He could feel it, the call to battle, an instinct as ancient as the Legion itself. The first objective was clear: find what remained of the Crimson Legion's allies, if any, and assert their dominance once again. Their journey took them to the outskirts of the Imperium, a loose collection of human-controlled worlds scattered across the galaxy, ruled by factions that thrived on lawlessness. A faction of mercenaries had been ravaging the outer colonies for months, picking apart the remnants of Legion bases and selling the scraps to the highest bidder. These mercenaries, however, were not prepared for the might of the Sentinels. Kaldar led the charge as they infiltrated the mercenary stronghold on a ruined planet called Rithar. The base was built into the side of a jagged mountain, its defenses reinforced by both automated weaponry and mercenary fighters, each one desperate for profit. But the Revenant Sentinels had something far more valuable: centuries of war experience. "Move out," Kaldar ordered, his voice calm, despite the fire burning in his chest. His glaive hummed as he gripped the shaft, the weapon's razor-sharp edge gleaming like a silver blade of fate. Drake, Talara, and Renos flanked him, the quartet moving like a single unit. Each of them knew the other's movements instinctively. This was the kind of unity the Legion had forged in the fires of battle. The mercenaries didn't stand a chance. The first wave came in the form of gunfire and crude explosives, but the Sentinels had already anticipated the attack. Drake, swift and precise, danced through the barrage of bullets, his bladed gauntlets cutting down the first attackers in a blur. Talara, towering and unstoppable, raised her shield, deflecting plasma fire with ease, while Kaldar carved a path forward, his glaive moving with such speed that it seemed like the air itself was being cut. Renos, ever the strategist, directed the flow of battle, signaling to Drake to flank left while Talara took the high ground. Each order was executed flawlessly, the coordination of a millennia-old war machine now restored. The mercenaries faltered, then broke, their resolve crumbling as the Revenant Sentinels pushed forward, unstoppable in their might. It wasn't just their strength that overwhelmed their enemies. It was their presence. They were the ghosts of a time long past, but their power and discipline had not been forgotten. The mercenaries, seeing the brutal efficiency of the Sentinels, began to retreat. "Prepare for close combat," Kaldar barked, and his voice carried like a thunderclap. With that, the Sentinels charged into the heart of the base, slaughtering the remaining fighters who thought they could resist. Inside the fortress, Kaldar paused as a flicker of movement caught his eye. A lone mercenary, clad in the black armor of a commander, stood at the far end of the hall, seemingly unaffected by the chaos around him. He was different. His eyes were cold, and there was something unnatural in the way he moved, like a shadow that had slipped through the cracks of time itself. "You?" Kaldar growled. The mercenary smiled, a slow, knowing grin. "I knew the Legion would return, but not like this," the man said, his voice smooth, calculating. "You're too late. The galaxy no longer belongs to you." Before Kaldar could respond, the mercenary snapped his fingers, and the ground beneath the Sentinel's feet trembled. A large section of the floor opened up, and a new wave of attackers emerged from the depths. Humans, but altered, enhanced by strange technologies that seemed as ancient as the Legion itself. The Sentinels fought back with a renewed fury, but the sight of their enemies, humans twisted by dark science, struck them to the core. The mercenary had known them. He was a relic, a dark mirror of the Legion's own soldiers, and his forces were as formidable as any enemy they had faced. "Who are you?" Renos demanded, his voice sharp as he took down another enemy with a brutal blow. The mercenary only smiled, his eyes glinting with a terrible certainty. I was one of you, once. But I learned the truth. The Crimson Legion was never meant to leave the galaxy. You were meant to fall. The Revenant Sentinels' blood ran cold as the mercenaries' words rang in their minds. A threat had emerged, someone who knew their past and had turned it against them. And this was only the beginning. The fight raged on, but now it was no longer just about reclaiming their place in the galaxy. It was about surviving the conspiracy that had been woven into the very fabric of their resurrection. They had been brought back for a reason, but the question remained, who was pulling the strings? As the last of the mercenaries fell, Keldar turned to his team. There was no time for answers, only action. The hunt had begun. The Revenant Sentinels stood amidst the smoking wreckage of the mercenary stronghold, their once glorious armor streaked with the blood and ash of their enemies. The battle had been swift, but the words of the mysterious mercenary commander echoed in Keldar's mind. He had been one of them, one of the Legion. How had they failed so terribly? What had happened to the galaxy during the centuries they had been dormant? Keldar clenched his fists, the grip on his glaive tightening. The answers lay somewhere beyond this place. Answers they would find, no matter the cost. We've wiped out the mercenaries, Renos said, his voice measured as always. But that man, that commander, he knew too much. And those soldiers, those enhanced humans, they weren't just any mercenaries. They were trained, maybe even resurrected. Talara, ever vigilant, stood with her back to a wall, scanning their surroundings. We should regroup. There's no telling what else is waiting for us. Drake, as always, was already several steps ahead, his keen eyes picking out a trail of blood leading toward a hidden underground complex beneath the base. They were hiding something. The commander's escape route is here. We can follow the trail. Keldar nodded grimly. Lead the way, Drake. We're not finished yet. The Sentinels moved as one, their every step a calculated move as they descended into the depths of the base. The darkness of the underground was suffocating, the air thick with the smell of ancient machinery, rust, and the faintest hint of something unnatural. This place had been abandoned for decades, maybe longer, but now it seemed alive with purpose, as if it was waiting for them. As they reached the heart of the complex, they found what they had been searching for, a massive data hub, its terminals flickering with corrupted streams of information. There, etched into the walls of the chamber, were symbols, ancient runes that matched the ones on the mysterious mercenaries' armor. This wasn't just a base, Talara said, her voice tinged with realization. This was a tomb, and it's not just any tomb. It's one for the dead of the Crimson Legion. Drake moved to one of the terminals and connected his gauntlet to the system. The hum of his armor resonated as the interface came to life, scrolling through centuries of classified records and war reports. What they found chilled them to the bone. The Legion was betrayed, Drake said, his voice low. The traitor was within our ranks. A series of decrypted transmissions scrolled past, some in Legion code, others in languages the Sentinels could not immediately understand. But one thing was clear. There was a conspiracy that had led to the fall of the Crimson Legion. And it began with a covert operation deep inside the Legion itself. A faction within had been secretly working with an external force, one that Keldar and the others had never encountered before. An alien species, powerful, ancient, and terrifying, known as the Arcanar. Renos stepped forward, scanning the data. These transmissions, they were hidden in plain sight. The Arcanar are not just invaders. They are manipulators. They infiltrated the Legion, twisted it from the inside out, and caused our downfall. They'd been working in the shadows for centuries. Keldar's mind raced. The Arcanar were unlike any enemy the Legion had ever faced. They weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They were puppeteers, pulling the strings behind every war, every rebellion, and every rise to power. They had played the long game, ensuring the fall of the Crimson Legion was no accident. "They've been using us," Calder growled, his fists clenched. "We were never meant to lead the galaxy. We were a weapon to be turned against it." The ground beneath them rumbled suddenly, and the chamber's lights flickered. It was as if the complex had been waiting for the right moment to reactivate, as if it had been designed for this very purpose, to alert someone. The hum of energy intensified, and a low mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Warning! Incoming threat. System breach detected." Calder didn't hesitate. "Get ready." The walls around them trembled, and the ceiling above cracked open. From the darkness above, a dozen figures dropped into the room, their armor black and seamless, their faces hidden behind faceless helmets. They were human, but their movements were unnaturally fluid, precise, and deadly. "These aren't mercenaries," Talara said, her voice steady. "These are the Arcanar's creations." The enhanced soldiers moved with terrifying speed, their weapons drawn and aimed at the Sentinels. The Revenant Sentinels responded instantly, springing into action. Talara's shield blocked the first wave of energy blasts, while Drake darted forward, cutting through the air with bladed precision. Kaldar swept his glaive across the room in a deadly arc, taking down two of the soldiers in an instant. Renos held his ground, issuing orders in a voice like iron, directing the Sentinels to take control of the situation. "They were waiting for us. This is no coincidence. The Arcanar want us here, to see the price of our resurrection." The battle raged in the chamber, but even as the Sentinels fought for their survival, the full weight of their discovery settled in. The Arcanar were not just enemies. They were the architects of their fall. They had been manipulating the very fabric of the Legion for centuries. And now, they were ready to finish what they had started. Calder's grip on his glaive tightened. "The Arcanar will pay for this, but first, we survive." The chamber trembled with the sound of battle, the clashing of weapons reverberating through the walls as the Revenant Sentinels fought with a ferocity that could only be born of centuries of war. Kaldar's glaive cut through the air, cleaving through the enhanced soldiers with ease, while Drake's agility and speed allowed him to dart between attackers, his blades flashing like lightning. Talara's shield absorbed the worst of the incoming fire, deflecting shots that would have obliterated any lesser warrior. Renos, ever the strategist, controlled the flow of the battle with ruthless precision, directing his comrades to exploit weaknesses and press the attack. But even as they overwhelmed the enhanced soldiers, the enemy's resilience was unnerving. Each soldier that fell was replaced by another, seemingly appearing from the shadows, as though the base itself was spitting out these creations. The air hummed with the tension of a war that was not of their making. Calder gritted his teeth. There's no end to them. These soldiers, they're being generated, not built. Renos nodded, his expression grim. The Arcanar's technology is beyond anything we've encountered. This place is more than a base, it's a factory. They've been using it to create more of these abominations. Talara smashed through another enemy soldier with a powerful swing of her shield. "We need to shut it down. If we don't, we're just fighting an endless wave." Kaldar's eyes narrowed. "Agreed. We take out their production line." They pushed deeper into the complex, cutting down any opposition in their path. The corridors grew narrower and more claustrophobic as they descended into the heart of the installation, where the true source of the enemy's power lay hidden. The air became thick with the smell of machinery, grease, and an unsettling metallic odor that made the back of Kaldar's neck itch. Finally, they'd reached a large chamber, its walls lined with massive tanks and vats, each filled with liquid that shimmered in the dim light. Suspended in the viscous fluid were the partially formed bodies of soldiers, their flesh and bone still in the early stages of transformation. The vats hummed with life, the technology pumping energy into these new creations, accelerating their growth at a rate far beyond anything natural. "This is it," Drake muttered, his voice laced with disgust as he took in the sight. "This is where they're being made. These soldiers aren't just enhanced. Renos said, his voice cold. They are born of the Arcanar's dark science. They've been manipulating biology, reshaping humanity into their image. And we've been their unwitting tools. Kaldar's fists clenched. He could feel the heat of rage building inside him, but he knew that emotion alone would not win this fight. They had to destroy this place, stop the Arcanar from using humanity as their puppet. We need to destroy the core, Kaldar said, his voice steady despite the fire burning within him. This is their lifeblood. Without it, they can't produce any more of these creations. The Sentinels moved swiftly, planting explosives at strategic points around the room, setting their charges with lethal precision. As they worked, the walls shuddered once more, and a mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. Intruder alert. Self-destruction sequence initiated. The countdown began, its mechanical voice droning on with cold efficiency. Kaldar's gaze snapped to the timer. Let's move, Kaldar barked. We're not staying for the fireworks. They sprinted from the chamber, racing through the labyrinthine corridors toward the surface. The complex was now alive with flashing red lights and the shrill wail of alarms. The walls trembled as the countdown continued, each second ticking away with an ominous finality. They had no time to waste. Behind them, the ground shook violently, as though the entire installation was tearing itself apart. The sound of explosions echoed through the halls as the charges they had set began to go off, blowing apart sections of the base with a deafening roar. The Sentinels moved with mechanical precision, navigating the collapsing tunnels and avoiding the falling debris. Their speed was unmatched, but the self-destruct was not giving them much time to escape. As they neared the exit, an armored door slammed shut before them, blocking their path. Kaldar slammed his fist into the panel, his rage propelling him forward. The door didn't budge. Get back, Drake shouted, and within moments, he had unsealed a secondary hatch. He punched in a series of commands, but before he could finish, a rumbling crash echoed from behind them. From the darkness, more of the enhanced soldiers appeared, charging forward with terrifying speed. We can't fight them all, Talara said, her shield raised as the soldiers closed in. Ranos gripped his weapon tightly, his voice sharp. We don't need to fight them all. We just need to survive long enough to get out. Kaldar turned toward the exit, his eyes cold and determined. Follow me. Now. With one last glance at the enemies closing in, the Sentinels made a break for the hatch. Drake and Talara took the rear, holding off the enhanced soldiers long enough for the others to reach the exit. The chamber was filled with blinding light as the countdown reached its final moments. As the last of the Sentinels emerged from the complex, the ground beneath them erupted in a violent explosion, sending shockwaves through the surrounding terrain. The base disintegrated in a massive fireball, a blinding flash of energy that obliterated everything in its path. The Sentinels staggered back, their eyes squinting against the light, as the ruins of the facility collapsed into nothingness. They had succeeded, at least for now. But as they stood there, watching the destruction, one thing was certain: the Arcanar were far from finished. The galaxy was about to change again. And this time, the Revenant Sentinels would be the ones to shape its fate. The Revenant Sentinels stood in the shadow of the exploding complex, the massive plume of smoke and fire slowly dissipating into the cold, empty sky. For a brief moment, the universe seemed still, too still, but beneath the surface, they could feel the shifting tides of destiny. Kaldar's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, the red glow of the flames reflecting in his gaze. He could feel the weight of the decision they had just made. The destruction of the base had been necessary, but the victory felt hollow. The Arcanar had survived, and they had a far more intricate plan than they had anticipated. As the dust settled, Kaldar's mind turned to their next move. We've dealt them a blow, Drake said, his voice low but steady. But they'll rebuild faster than we can anticipate. This isn't over. We need to strike at their heart, Kaldar replied, his jaw tightening. But first, we need more information. The Arcanar have ties to someone within the Legion. We've been used, manipulated. The betrayal runs deeper than we thought. Renos turned to face Kaldar, his sharp eyes cutting through the haze. Then we need allies. Allies who can help us learn more about the Arcanar and their true plan. We may be the last of the Legion, but there are still remnants of humanity out there. Humanity who fought beside us in the past. If we can find them, perhaps we can turn the tide. Kaldar considered this. The galaxy was vast, and it had splintered into countless factions in the centuries they had been gone. The Imperium was in ruins, and what little remained of the Crimson Legion's allies were scattered, hiding in the corners of the galaxy. But Renos was right. There were still people who remembered the old days, the days when the Legion's name was feared across the stars. It was time to find them. We'll start with the Nexus system, Kaldar said, his voice firm. There's a faction there that owes us. They were loyal once. If anyone knows how to fight the Arcanar, it's them. The Sentinels boarded their ship, the Vanguard, and set a course for the Nexus system. The journey was long, and the quiet hum of the engines was the only sound that filled the ship. Each of them retreated into their thoughts, the weight of the coming confrontation heavy on their minds. The Arcanar were a threat unlike any they had faced before. Their influence was insidious, creeping into the very fabric of human civilization. But the Revenant Sentinels were nothing if not resilient. They had fought countless battles in the past, and they would fight again. After days of travel, the Vanguard entered the orbit of Nexus, a system teeming with asteroid fields and ancient space stations. It had once been a hub for the Legion's operations in the Outer Rim, a place where they could regroup and strategize. Now, it was a refuge for those who remembered the glory of the old days. The Sentinels touched down on the surface of a forgotten station, one that had once served as a safe haven for Legion forces. Its rusted exterior was a grim reminder of the passage of time. But as the airlock opened, the familiar scent of old metal and stale air greeted them. "We're here," Talara said, her voice steady. "Let's see if anyone's still left to answer our call." The interior of the station was dimly lit, its halls quiet and deserted. But as the Sentinels moved deeper into its core, they began to hear faint sounds, voices distant but distinct. They weren't alone. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, clad in a long, tattered cloak. His face was hidden beneath the hood, but Kaldar could tell by the way he moved that this was no ordinary man. He was a survivor, and one who had seen far too many battles. "You're late," the figure said, his voice rough, as if he hadn't spoken in years. "The galaxy's gone to hell, and the Legion's dead. What's left to fight for?" "We fight for humanity," Kaldar said, his voice unwavering. "We fight for those who can't fight for themselves. The Arcanar are still out there. And they found a way into the heart of our people. We need your help." The figure studied Kaldar for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he seemed to weigh the words. "I'm not sure you understand the danger you're in," he said finally. "The Arcanar have already infiltrated much of the galaxy's infrastructure. You think you can fight them with what's left of the Legion. You don't have the strength." "We don't need strength alone," Kaldar replied. "We need knowledge. You were once part of the Legion's intelligence network. You know things that can help us. Help us stop them before it's too late." The figure hesitated, then let out a sigh. "You're right. The Arcanar are everywhere, and they've spread their influence like a plague. But I know something you don't." Kaldar's interest piqued. "What is it?" The figure pulled back his hood, revealing a face worn by years of hardship, his eyes darkened by the weight of his knowledge. "I was one of the few who saw the truth before the fall. The Arcanar didn't just infiltrate the Legion. They infiltrated humanity itself. The traitors you seek, they're not just within the Legion. They're everywhere." Kaldar's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "They've embedded themselves into the highest levels of human government, military, and industry. The Arcanar's grip is deeper than you know. They control the future. And if you're going to stop them, you'll need to fight not just for the Legion's past, but for the future of humanity itself. The weight of the revelation hit Kaldar hard, but there was no turning back. The war they had begun was far bigger than they had ever imagined. The fight for humanity's survival was only just beginning. The revelation hung heavy in the air. The Arcanar had not only infiltrated the Legion, they had burrowed deep into the very heart of humanity. The traitors Kaldar sought were not confined to the remnants of the Crimson Legion. They were embedded in the government, the military, and every institution humanity had built over the centuries. The battle was no longer just against a singular external enemy. It was a war against corruption, deception, and a hidden enemy that had poisoned every corner of the galaxy. Kaldar's fists clenched at his sides, but he did not allow the anger to take hold of him. Not yet. His voice was low, controlled when he spoke. How do we fight them if they're everywhere? The man who had revealed this horrifying truth, an old operative who had once served as part of the Legion's intelligence, leaned against a rusted pillar. His eyes were weary, haunted by the years of hiding in the shadows. The Arcanar didn't just infiltrate government or military, he said slowly, choosing his words with care. They've manipulated the very essence of humanity's evolution. They didn't just sow chaos. They've cultivated it, shaping factions, instigating wars, and playing all sides. Reno stepped forward, his brow furrowed. So they'd been pulling the strings the entire time. Every conflict, every rebellion, it's all been a part of their plan. The operative nodded grimly. Exactly. And it goes even deeper. They've created sleeper cells, humans who are unknowingly working for them. These cells are activated when needed, like pawns in a game. The Arcanar's influence runs deeper than any ideology or political structure. They use humanity's own history, its divisions, to manipulate it. Kaldar's mind raced as he processed the information. The idea of an enemy so insidious, so patient, was unlike anything the Legion had faced before. The Arcanar were not just conquerors. They were architects of manipulation, laying a foundation that spanned centuries. How do we uncover the sleeper cells? Talara asked, her voice tight with the same sense of urgency that Kaldar felt. If they've infiltrated everything, how can we know who we can trust? There are patterns, the operative replied, his voice a whisper as though he was imparting the most dangerous secret. The Arcanar have left a trail. They need humanity to remain fractured, but there are those who resisted. The old alliances, the ones who fought with the Legion against the darkness before the fall, they're still out there, hidden, waiting. You need to find them. The survivors of the First Coalition. The First Coalition, Drake echoed, his brow furrowing in confusion. That's ancient history. The Coalition fell after the First Arcanar War. You're saying they're still active? The operative's lips curled into a wry smile. Some of them are. They were a loose coalition of humans and allies, beings who weren't afraid to stand up to the Arcanar. But after the Legion's betrayal and the Arcanar's rise to power, the coalition scattered. Some went underground, others disappeared. But there's one place they might still be gathered: Elysium Station. Kaldar's gaze sharpened. Elysium Station, that's a myth. No one's been able to confirm it exists for centuries. The operative nodded. I thought it was a myth too, until I found this. He pulled a small data disk from his pocket and handed it to Drake. This will lead you there, but be careful. The Arcanar know about Elysium Station. They're searching for it too. If you get too close, you'll be walking right into their trap. Kaldar took the disk, feeling its weight in his hand. We'll find it. The Arcanar won't stop us. The operative's eyes hardened, as though he was measuring Kaldar's resolve. You're not just fighting an army anymore. The Arcanar are connected to the very core of humanity's future. This isn't just about revenge. This is about reclaiming humanity's future from their grasp. The tension in the room thickened as the gravity of their mission settled over them. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but it was the only path that mattered. The Arcanar had hidden themselves in plain sight, manipulating humanity's destiny for centuries. And now, the Revenant Sentinels were the only ones left to uncover the truth and take the fight to them. Renos looked to Kaldar, his expression one of quiet determination. "We've survived betrayal before. We can survive this." Kaldar nodded, his gaze steady as he turned toward the hatch of their ship. "We will, and we'll find Elysium Station, no matter the cost." With that, the Sentinels made their way back to the Vanguard, their resolve hardening. The journey to Elysium Station would be treacherous, but it was their only chance to uncover the truth and bring the Arcanar to light. Humanity's future lay in their hands, and the Revenant Sentinels would not let it slip away. As the Vanguard powered up and began its journey toward the unknown, Kaldar's thoughts were a whirlwind of strategy, betrayal, and the haunting question of what they would find at Elysium Station. There was no going back. They had crossed a line, and the Arcanar would soon know that the last of the Crimson Legion had returned. The Vanguard cut through the cold, empty expanse of space like a blade through air. The stars stretched out before them in a seemingly endless sea of black. Kaldar sat in the command chair, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest, though his mind was far from still. The journey to Elysium Station had taken longer than expected, and the silence of the void weighed heavily on his shoulders. Even in the face of impending danger, there was a nagging unease in his gut. "We're nearing the coordinates." Drake's voice broke through the silence. His eyes were fixed on the controls, the faint glow of the navigational systems casting a blue hue across his face. No anomalies detected. Nothing out of the ordinary. Kaldar's brow furrowed. "Something doesn't feel right. They were expecting us, and they haven't made a move. Either we're walking into an elaborate trap, or—" Renos cut him off with a glance. "Or they've been waiting so long they don't know what to do when someone actually shows up. Either way, we proceed cautiously." Talara, who had been silently observing from her position at the rear of the ship, spoke up. "There's something strange about this place. If the Arcanar are here, they've learned to hide their presence. Elysium Station could be a ghost, a place abandoned for generations." The ship shuddered slightly as they entered a dense cloud of asteroids, their trajectory shifting as the Vanguard skillfully navigated through the rocky labyrinth. The station was supposed to be hidden in a remote sector, its coordinates lost to all but a few. It was a relic from a time long past, its function obscured by myth, yet undeniably tied to the legend of the First Coalition. Kaldar leaned forward, his eyes scanning the readouts. "Drake, can you get a visual?" Drake worked his controls with practiced ease, and the view from the ship's forward cameras flickered to life. The station came into view, a massive structure, shaped like a jagged spire, twisting and contorting through the void. It was larger than they had expected, a testament to the engineering genius of the First Coalition. The station appeared abandoned, its dark hull partially concealed by the surrounding asteroid field. No lights flickered in its depths, and no signs of life, hostile or otherwise, were visible. "The station looks dormant," Drake said. "There's no indication of power or life support. It's like it's been dead for centuries." Renos stood behind Kaldar, his voice quiet but firm. "And that's exactly why it feels wrong. The Arcanar don't leave things abandoned. They repurpose, control, and consume. I'm not sure what we'll find inside, but we're not going in unprepared." Kaldar nodded, his face set. "We'll approach with caution. Talara, Drake, you'll be with me. Renos, keep the Vanguard ready for a fast escape if we need it." The crew began preparing, arming themselves for whatever lay ahead. Their weapons were checked, their armor adjusted, and every step taken in silence as the station grew closer. As they approached the station's airlock, Kaldar's thoughts raced, but there was little room for doubt now. The fate of humanity rested on what they uncovered here. Elysium Station had to hold the answers, and Kaldar would not let them slip away. The airlock of the Vanguard sealed with a hiss, and the crew stepped into the dark void of Elysium Station. The artificial gravity kicked in as they passed through the station's entrance, the low hum of the engines faintly audible in the otherwise eerie silence. The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the empty hallways. It felt as though the station itself was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone. The crew moved cautiously through the station, their footsteps echoing off the cold metallic floors. Talara held her shield at the ready, Drake's twin blades glinting in the dim light. Kaldar's senses were alert, every sound amplified in the stillness. They passed abandoned control rooms, rooms filled with rusting equipment and shattered screens. There was no sign of life, no sign of anything that resembled the Coalition's old stronghold. The longer they walked, the more oppressive the silence became. And then they found it. At the heart of the station, deep within the labyrinth of corridors, they discovered the central chamber. The walls were lined with ancient technology, blinking with life despite the station's otherwise decayed state. In the center of the room, a massive console stood, its interface completely intact, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. This is it, Kaldar murmured, stepping forward. He had no idea how long the console had been here or how it had survived the centuries, but he could feel the weight of its significance. This was the key to everything. Drake moved to his side, studying the console with a mixture of awe and suspicion. It looks like it's been waiting for someone to activate it. You think it's linked to the First Coalition's secret? Kaldar's eyes narrowed. It's the only way to find out. Let's see what it has to say. The moment Kaldar's fingers made contact with the console, the entire room came alive. The lights flared brighter, and the hum of energy vibrated through the station. A voice, cold and mechanical, filled the air. Authorization required. Access granted to Coalition Protocol 1. Welcome, Revenant Sentinels. The words hit Kaldar like a punch to the gut. They had expected answers, but this was far more than that. Someone had been waiting for them. Someone who had known they would come. As the voice continued, Kaldar's heart raced. This was just the beginning. The voice reverberated through the chamber, chilling and cold, yet there was an unmistakable weight to its words. The mention of Revenant Sentinels sent a ripple of recognition through the group. This was no mere machine, no automated response. It was something far more deliberate. Coalition Protocol 1. Talara asked, her voice edged with caution. What does that mean? Kaldar didn't have an immediate answer. His mind was still processing the implications of the voice's recognition of them. The mention of the Revenant Sentinels, their name, lost to time, implied that someone somewhere had been keeping track of their existence. Perhaps more importantly, it meant they weren't alone in this fight. The Coalition was an alliance of the boldest minds and greatest warriors humanity had to offer, Kaldar said quietly, his gaze locked on the glowing console. They knew something was coming, something beyond even the Arcanar. It seems they planned for us, or at least for what's left of us. Drake stepped forward, examining the console's interface more closely. It's like it's been waiting, as if it knew we'd find this place. That's unsettling. Kaldar nodded, feeling a strange mixture of unease and urgency. There's more to this station, more to this plan, than we've been told. It's not just about the Arcanar. It never was. This was about preparing humanity for something even more dangerous. With a deep breath, Kaldar activated the console. A low hum filled the room, and a holographic map began to materialize in the air, flickering slightly before stabilizing. It displayed a network of planets, systems, and sectors, each linked together by a thin web of connections. But one symbol stood out above all the others, an emblem of the First Coalition, glowing faintly at the center of the network. This map, Kaldar whispered, this isn't just a guide. It's a plan. The map zoomed in, highlighting a section of the galaxy marked by numerous red dots, each one representing a different planet or system. Kaldar's heart sank as he read the names, long-forgotten places, all hidden from the galaxy's prying eyes. These were the final strongholds of the Coalition, places where humanity's last defense against the Arcanar could be rallied. Reno studied the map over Kaldar's shoulder, his eyes scanning the interconnected web. What is this? A resistance network. More than that, Kaldar said, his voice taut with the realization. This is a weapon. A final strike against the Arcanar. The Coalition didn't just want to survive. They were preparing for an all-out war. But the most chilling detail was still to come. The map zoomed further into a location, an uncharted system, a black hole surrounded by dead space. There, within the gravitational pull of the void, the map identified a single planet. But the planet was not what caught their attention. It was the anomaly orbiting it, a massive structure, almost too large to comprehend, embedded in the event horizon. This, Kaldar breathed, is what the Coalition was truly after. The Black Forge, the operative's voice came from behind them, sending a jolt of surprise through Kaldar. The old intelligence agent had approached unnoticed, his voice low and laden with fear. I've heard stories about it, but no one thought it was real. Renos turned toward the man. What is the Black Forge? The Black Forge is a weapon of unimaginable power, the operative said, his voice trembling with barely contained dread. It was constructed by the Arcanar, an ancient superweapon buried deep within a black hole to keep its true nature hidden. The Coalition's final act was to build a way to destroy it, but they failed. They couldn't reach it in time. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation sinking in. The Arcanar had built something beyond comprehension, something so powerful that the First Coalition had poured all its remaining resources into a failed attempt to stop it. If the Forge still existed, it would be the ultimate weapon, the key to the Arcanar's dominance over humanity. We can't let it fall into their hands, Kaldar said, his voice a steel thread of determination. The Forge must be destroyed, once and for all. The operative's face darkened, but the black hole, it's not just a matter of reaching it. Even if you find a way, the Forge is more than a weapon. It's the heart of their power. Kaldar turned away, a fire burning in his chest. We have no choice. If we can't destroy it, humanity's future is lost. The Forge must be disabled at any cost. Talara spoke up, her voice firm with resolve. We'll gather the resistance, rally what's left of the Coalition. We'll fight to the end. This is our purpose. Kaldar turned to face his team, each of them standing tall with a silent promise of unwavering loyalty. The path ahead was treacherous, a journey that would take them to the very edge of the galaxy and beyond. But they were the Revenant Sentinels, and this was the final war they had been born to fight. As the holographic map flickered and dissolved, Kaldar felt the weight of his ancestors' legacy settling on his shoulders. They had awakened something long buried. And now, humanity's fate was in their hands. The Vanguard powered up, ready for the next phase of their journey. The battle was far from over.